Hello, my name is Lydia Mae Simmons. I am a singer, songwriter, and producer. I currently have 3 singles out on streaming under the name Lydia Mae Simmons, and I'm going to be releasing an album soon, hopefully at the end of the summer, if not sooner than that. You can listen to my songs anywhere you get your music. This is going to be a breakdown of my second single called I Am, a story of what the song is about, what inspired me to write it, and the production process from beginning to end. I have more music coming soon. I hope to have more videos like this coming soon, and I hope you like. Hello, this is Editing Lydia in my bedroom. I recorded a whole explanation of what this song is about, and then I was watching it back and I said so much and yet so little, and it was a bunch of ununderstandable bullshit. So let me say again, the song is very simple. The lyrics are very simple because the experience is very simple. This was born from a series of experiences I had in November of 2025 where for the first time I just felt weirdly tapped into the energy of the world and of my own body, and felt for the first time like I understood why it was joyful to be alive, what people meant when they said they enjoyed life just for the sake of being alive and not for the sake of experiences or achievements, but just being alive was a joyful experience for them. That was not something that I had ever experienced before, but for whatever reason, whether it was therapy or divine intervention or whatever, I for a few shining weeks felt really tapped into that. It was just noticing very simple experiences like how just being aware of the feeling of your clothes on your body or putting your hand on your face or something like that can feel very energetic and exciting and pleasurable and beautiful. And I am autistic, so I am weirdly always aware of how things feel and how my clothes feel on my body and stuff like that, but was not aware that that could also be a good thing. And I also have a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a variety of mental and physical health issues that make it very difficult to tap into that feeling. So this was very brand new for me, and it felt very obviously personally impactful, but additionally politically impactful. Not in the sense that just thinking happy thoughts and feeling good in life will save us from the horrible, unspeakable evils of capitalism, but just in the sense that capitalism steals our joy away from us and relies upon us being miserable and hating ourselves and not realizing that the most beautiful things in life are completely free and require nothing else but that we simply have breath within our bodies, and that everybody is capable of experiencing beautiful, joyful, wonderful things and living a completely full life. Capitalism requires us to constantly be working for something external outside of ourselves and to feel shitty about ourselves and have very low self-worth because then we're easier to exploit. So this feels like something that, although I have had trouble holding on to it since I wrote this song, and it's always a struggle to consistently work towards this feeling of loving just being alive and having breath, it is something that is an aspiration of mine, and I hope that we can all work towards recognizing our own intrinsic value and the magical, beautiful thing that being alive is, even with all of its immense pain and struggle, and that would also inspire us to stand the fuck up for ourselves and start working to do whatever we can to say no to all of these systems that devalue us and try to exploit us and steal our lives away from us because they don't think that we're worth something just because we're alive. So again, the lyrics to this song are very simplistic because I feel like many words don't actually add to this thought. It's just the most simple thing in the world, just to love breathing and being alive. But I hope that this song inspires all of us to try and to love ourselves more and to burn all the rest of it to the ground. If that won't get me removed from YouTube for saying that. Bye. So this song started with this little, I don't know if you would call this an arpeggiated pattern or a motif, a little melodic moment. I don't know, this is what it sounds like. And I came across that like I do with many of the little, I guess it's an underlick. I don't know. I heard that word recently. I think that's what that is called. Like a melodic thing that goes throughout the whole song but is never sung. I think if Phineas is correct in his definition of what an underlick is, then that's what that is. So if I'm wrong, you know where I got that misinformation from. Anyways, I got that from just playing around on my keyboard, which is how I get a lot of the inspiration for my songs, because I'm not a skilled piano player, but if you just sit down in front of the keyboard and diddle around for long enough, you might find something amazing. It's obviously very simple, like the song is, but very impactful. It feels very emotional and powerful to me. These are just two synthesizers from my favorite plugin or instrument in Logic, the Alchemy synthesizer. Whoa. I have to open it up really hugely when I'm going through it because I have a lot of trouble reading white text on dark backgrounds, and so this, when it's small, I seriously can't read shit. It makes my eyes hurt. But this is an amazing synthesizer that comes free in Logic, an amazing library with a ton of great presets, and I find that it really has everything that you need. And I have been, as you can see here, a lot of these are rated. I'm always working on going through and testing out all of the presets in here and rating them, and you can leave little notes, little tags. One thing that you will notice, if I scroll down far enough, this is what they look like when they're unrated. And for a long time, when I would open this up, I saw that it had 3 of them highlighted, and I thought that this was kind of like that they came pre-rated, or that like this was an average of how other people had rated them at some point. And I was like, well, they're all fucking rated at 3 stars. That's not useful to me at all. And then after about almost a year of using it, I realized, no, I was supposed to be rating them. So that was a little bit embarrassing, but you live and you learn. Then I rated a fuck ton of them, and then Logic updated and deleted everything. So I had to start over from scratch. But here we are again, and I do love me some Alchemy. Almost all of the instruments in the song are going to be from Alchemy. Back to the point. This is the preset Warm Flutters, which sounds like this. That's mostly what you're hearing at this point in the song. And that is the Cold preset. Did a little bit of EQing. Most everything I'm gonna have a high pass filter on just to cut out the low stuff. And you will notice also on the EQing on most tracks, I will have a lot of the low mids cut out because I do have a preference for very warm, soft, lush sounds, but it is very easy to clog up that part of the frequency spectrum and just have a very muddy mix where basically it sounds really loud, but you also can't hear anything. Like you can't pick out what you're hearing. It's just everything kind of like muddles together, and it's just like too much and it's overwhelming. So in order to maintain some level of clarity where you can actually hear the individual instruments, I find I have to do a lot of harsh, I mean, that's not very harsh, but on most instruments I have to take out the low mid so that they don't get too clogged up. And then I also have this TDR Nova. This is a good free dynamic EQ plugin. I know the FabFilter Pro Q4 is what everybody talks about when it comes to dynamic EQ, and I will probably own that at some point, but I haven't wanted to pay for it yet. And this is still great if you just want to try out dynamic EQ. Dynamic EQ is essentially, instead of doing a static cut where you just take that part of the frequency spectrum out for the entire song, dynamic EQ only ducks that part of the frequency spectrum out when it gets to a certain loudness or when it hits a certain threshold. So as you can see here, it's pulling down in the middle as the sound grows. So it can help duck down and make sure they don't get too overwhelming as they grow. Just a little bit of EQing. And then the other sound that I layered on top of that is Dreamy Plucks, another Alchemy preset. I don't even know what you would call that. That's maybe like a piano or something. It's on the Bright preset, and all I have is it compressed a little bit, and also I turned up the distortion there. Not entirely sure why I compressed it, but probably if you're seeing a lot of compression and EQ on this is because I had to... My sister just texted me that one of our favorite baseball players has meningitis. He has meningitis? May God bless Josh Smith and protect him. Anyways, if I have compression or heavy EQing on this track, it's probably because this was a very difficult mix for me to do, and in fact I released it and then realized the mix was kind of fucked up and I had to go back and fix it. So when I release my album soon, it will be a different mix, but it was just, I mean, it was out of control. This is a very dreamy, washy, ethereal song, but I think I just had like way too much going on, so I probably after the fact went through and just compressed and cut out a lot of things to try and get a little bit more control. So it's been a while since I did this and I'm not entirely sure of the exact settings, but I imagine that's why I did what I did. So started off with that. The other thing I have going on is some pads playing the chords that sound like this. And that chord progression is G add 9, D7 sus4, C6, and B7 flat 13 sus4. I don't know much technically about chords, but I do love the way that one sounds. So I don't question when these gifts are given to me. I just roll with it. But what chord progression would that be? Let's find out by Googling so I don't get it wrong again, like I did in my last video. G major chords. That would be a 1, 5, 4, 3. So 1, 5, 4, 3 chord progression. This is autumn, that's a very nice little warm ethereal thing, and then those bright strings you're hearing are the preset dark and distant. Which I feel like that kind of pierces through the mix nicely and sounds very beautiful to me. I have autumn centered, and that kind of adds a little bit of warmth, and then the brighter strings are kind of coming in from the side. I have them panned to the right. And then I also have the bass, and there's more bass that comes in later, but it starts off with this warm body preset that is slowly growing. So as you can see, I have the gain automated, and it starts off pretty quiet. Then in the first verse, it gets a little bit louder and grows until it hits its peak loudness in the first chorus. So let's listen to it there instead, so we can actually hear it. I feel like that's just a very ominous, cool bass. I like a bass that has a little bit of hollowness to it, where it doesn't feel just like a solid wall of sound, but it feels like it kind of has some dimension. So I like that one for this, and that's the dark preset under warm body. That's growing throughout the intro and the first verse. Also growing a little bit here is this other little arpeggiated moment that I have going. So that is, this first one is ambient guitar. This is one of my favorite Alchemy presets. It's just like, again, kind of hollow, kind of ambient, a little bit spooky. That's just playing a little plucked version of the chord progression, an arpeggiated version of the chord progression, and then I added in this magic stone. Which certainly has a lot more reverb and delay on it, so you can't hear the arpeggiation quite as clearly there, but that is just adding a little bit of airiness and silveriness, which is always very ethereal. And I have the gain automated on here to go up and down, so it's coming up and ducking out. That adds a little bit of rhythm and flow and kind of acts as a little bit of ear candy because it's something that's not always there throughout the whole song. So that is pretty much all we have at the beginning. Then that continues just one loop, and then we get into the vocals here. So with the vocals, this is essentially very similar to just having all of the wet effects like the reverb, the delay, or whatever on a bus. But instead of doing that, it just kind of helps me visually to have it on a separate track. So this is the dry vocals, although I do have some effects on it. And then this is the more wet effects. You can see I have pedal board, which is a delay plugin. And then I also have reverb on here. So these I can kind of do the volume differently. So the reverb effects are a little bit quieter. And I also find it easier to automate things on the separate channels, see them separately instead of trying to work with two buses at the same time. Although I have started using buses more, and they are not as complicated as they may seem, but I'm still kind of addicted to doing this. I will just let you listen to the intro and the first verse and the chorus because I'm nice, and then we'll talk about how I did the vocal production. So this song, I feel like the vocals are kind of the star. The melody of the song is kind of the star. I often feel this way when writing songs, but I think the feeling was the strongest with this one. It kind of felt like a melody that I had heard before. It felt very nostalgic for some reason. I don't think I necessarily know enough about music theory to know why, but it just sounded very familiar to me, and I always get worried that I'm accidentally stealing somebody's melody. I worry that I'm gonna put a song out one day and someone's gonna be like, this sounds exactly like this other song, and I'm gonna be like, oh my god, that's where I'd heard it before. Knock on wood. Anyways, I really like that the vocals in this song are very bright and very ethereal. They feel very heavenly to me. Again, this is the exact same vocal track, just duplicated down to add the wet effects to. So on the dry effects, I just have the compressor. I would have already compressed it here at the beginning. Yeah, I would have had one compressor going on. This is the track that I recorded it on. I had a compressor on it. That was pretty high ratio, 5.8 to 1, just over the entire thing with medium attack, medium release. So that's just doing general compression and the vintage VCA. I won't pretend to say that I know what the real difference is between all these compressors. This just happened to be the one I decided on this time. In my head, it has a kind of analog warmth. I don't know whether that's true. I can't really hear it, but I'm working on it. Then I bounced that down, and here I have these fades going. It looks like I was trying to cut out some background noise that was happening in between lines. It has been many months since I recorded this. But anyway, then I would have bounced that down, and then you get the full one track going on. Then here I added, obviously, another compressor. This is doing more light compression, so just a 2.1 to 1 ratio, but this is the vintage FET. I do know the FETs are a little more aggressive and a little louder, and I also did turn on some distortion there, so I must have been trying to go for some type of warmth or distortion. Not positive, but I do like the result. Turns out I put some compression on this one too. This is the Studio FET. The Studio FET, I do know this is modeled after, I do believe, an 1176 compressor. It is a little more aggressive. This is the one that I can definitely hear the difference on. It adds a lot of distortion and saturation, and you have to be very careful with how you use this one, otherwise it will make your shit sound crazy. But here I used it, the threshold's a little bit higher. I believe this would have probably been used to tame the peaks. Whether the settings are correct to do that, not positive. I'm still working on learning compression, but that's probably what I was going for. And I add Fresh Air by Slate Digital. This is a plugin that just adds a little bit of air and lightness and presence to the vocal. And you only want very, very minimal settings. So you do not want to be turning this up to like 50% or God forbid 100. It will make it sound like someone's screaming in your ear. You only need a very little bit of that to make it work. And then I do have a little bit of reverb on here. Dream Hall is my favorite preset in the Space Designer. As you can see, I just have it automated here to throw out certain words, and then otherwise there is no reverb going on there. I like to do this with transitions to keep the energy going, where sometimes it can be easy for the energy to go down and feel like it falls flat before something comes back. Adding reverb throws and delay throws like this can help the energy transition into the next phase without just completely dropping out. So this is what that sounds like. So it just kind of echoes out. Otherwise, the reverb is on this Wet FX channel. Again, also has some compression, also has some Fresh Air, also the Dream Hall. I am always trying to experiment with using different presets, and I'm always just coming back to this. So this will be a signature of this album, if nothing else. I do not have that automated, so it just stays at -11 dB the whole time. And as I said, for this delay plugin that is in the pedal board in Logic Pro, so you would go to Amps and Pedals, pedal board, and then it will be down here, this delay plugin. And I have that automated, so that's what this sounds like here. That one's a little more subtle because the delay is going throughout the whole track, but it just adds a little bit more. And then on the EQ, again, I took out a little bit of the low mids because although that is kind of where a lot of the presence of my vocal sits, it can get overwhelming, especially when you add reverb to it. So I like to take it out on the Wet FX channel. And then again, just a little boost here and here to add on to what the Fresh Air plugin is doing. And then I also have the harmonies that come in. It's reasonably minimal harmonies on this song and probably a little bit more ambient, but this is what they sound like going into the first chorus. favorite little things to do, again, to keep the energy going and to help transition from one section of the song to another, I do like to do little vocal things like this. I don't know, maybe I rely on it a little too heavily, but it feels very magical to me. Like the main vocals, these vocals are very bright and silvery. Something about it, when you add a little bit too much brightness and a little bit too much distortion, to me, it does kind of give it a vintage feel, like kind of not too vintage like the 90s. Kind of has an Enya-esque quality where it's just like a little bit too grungy, and I leaned into that with this song. So again, we have fresh air and no mid-air because I don't like for the harmonies to sit too much in the middle of the frequency spectrum because I don't want them competing with the main vocals. I kind of want them to feel like they're coming in around the sides, so I tend to focus more on the higher frequencies and cut out the middle a little bit, again to avoid muddiness but also make it sound a little bit more ethereal and a little bit more in the background instead of being right up there with the main vocals. I cut out a couple of places. The main parts of my voice tend to sit around 260 to 300 hertz and then also around 900 hertz, so I tend to cut out a lot of those parts so that it doesn't compete with the main vocals. I also am using one of the pedals from the pedal board. This is the Heavenly Chorus, so that just adds a little bit of chorusing, and I mostly use it because I really like that name and the way it looks. You can get me by describing anything as lush, as soft, as warm, as heavenly, as silvery, dreamy, magical, ethereal, so on and so forth. Anyways, then I also have the Dream Hall, dreamy. This has the wet up a little bit higher on there. I didn't really automate anything, so it's pretty much just staying the same throughout this whole track. Then after the reverb, I did a little bit of boosting. So as you can see here at the beginning, I cut out a bunch of frequencies, then I added the reverb, then I boosted after that. So normally if there are any pesky frequencies, there's debate about whether or not you want to take them out before or after compression, but normally you really do want to take them out before you put on any reverb, because reverb will just kind of, it takes everything that's there and it amplifies it a little bit and also kind of makes it a little bit more muddy and spreads it out more widely throughout the song. So if you have any frequencies that could be a problem, reverb's just going to make them worse. So it's best to have one EQ where you cut out all those pesky frequencies, then add the reverb. Then if you feel like you're lacking anything, you can add it back after the fact instead of feeding it into the reverb. So that's why I did that. In the first chorus, we also add a new bass. So that's kind of a thumpy, echoey bass, and that goes along with the drums that also come on in the first chorus that sound like this. So we have a kick. This is the depth kick from Alchemy reverb preset. It didn't pretty much do anything to that except I just cut out a little bit of the low end. It was probably just getting a little bit too loud. And then I also have from the Bluebird kit. This is not in Alchemy, this is in Logic. It's just one of their acoustic drum kits. I do really like this one. It's got some nice loud toms, boomy drums, boomy kicks that have a very 80s feel to me, so I like to use those, but this is just the hi-hats. Very subtle, not doing a whole lot, but it just adds a little bit of rhythm. So I really liked that kick. This tends to be my favorite thing to do with drums, is just to keep up the rhythm with one kick. And sometimes it's difficult to expand out of my comfort zone in that regard, but I do think it worked really well in this song. And I expand on it a little bit more, but that's what comes in there. And then this is what you get in the second verse. So you can see in the transition between the first chorus and the second verse, I have a little bit of a pause here by just repeating the last chord instead of continuing on in the same progression, and that helps just feel like you have a little bit of a reprieve, and then you naturally enter into the next verse. And then you go into the second verse, not a whole lot changes, but I do add this second, it's not really a bass, but it's kind of in that part of the frequency spectrum. This is the dulcimer wash. So that's going on in the same bass pattern as the other basses are doing. But again, as this song builds, you get a little bit more rhythm coming in. So you have the kicks, but also the kicks echo a little bit. And so that echo also adds a little bit of rhythm. And then you get even more of a kind of pulsing rhythm with that. I added another pad playing the chords, pan to the left. So now you get a more full stereo field with this. That is the Traveler in Time preset. I feel like that has a really good balance of being very ethereal and airy and magical and also very warm. Feels very nostalgic to me. On that one, I also put the delay plugin and I have a little bit of EQing going on. So that just added a little bit more fullness to the pads. And then I also have the main thing that changes is I have a couple iterations of this sweet flute pad that I believe is playing kind of along with the melody. That's kind of a very 90s hollow flute that I like to do, and I do like to add as much as I can, just little places of ear candy like that where you get a little instrument just kind of like doubling the vocal or adding a little bit of a fill in a blank space. Taylor Swift reference in the song. So that's what I was doing there. Not entirely sure why I did two different iterations of it if they were going to have basically exactly the same settings, but it worked. I'm happy with the results. And then I also have, this is going throughout the whole song, just a bunch of sound effects to add wind or nature sounds to the song, which sound kind of like this. So the Church Street mix synth here is definitely just doing a little bit of just random little notes. But then I also have panned all throughout the stereo field all of these different Alchemy presets that I found that kind of have a windy, airy sound to them. And I love to just go through after I've finished the majority of the song production and add those sounds in, because although you can barely hear them when you're listening to it, first of all, I love adding them. I think that's a very fun little gift to give myself at the end of finishing a song. And also I do feel like it adds a little bit more movement and energy to the song that you can feel even if you can't really hear it. But also I just love wind. It feels so magical to me. A lot of my favorite songs, although I couldn't really describe how this works musically, they sound kind of windy to me. They conjure up the image of like standing on a balcony where it's like a late summer evening and it's just like the perfect temperature and it's really windy and you just feel very peaceful, or like standing in a field watching a storm coming in, whatever. Like songs that conjure up that image in my mind are very meaningful to me and very beautiful. So I like to add wind into my own songs because it gives me that feeling. So those just kind of go throughout the whole song. My favorite part of this song is the transition into the second chorus, where as you can see, a lot of things are going to change here. So I cut out this main underlick that's going throughout the whole thing. That's just totally absent for the chorus. I also cut out this dark and deep bass, also this arpeggiated pattern that's happening. I cut out the hi-hats, and I also do some automation on some of these tracks to up the reverb or delay going into this transition so that they don't just cut out immediately, but they kind of ring out so that you don't feel like you lose the energy that they were bringing. So as you can hear, it's not like they just stopped. They rang out a little bit, so that helps with the transition to not feel like they lost energy. But this is what it sounds like going out of verse 2 and into the second chorus. about to come back with 100% more energy in the outro, but I do really like that reprieve. It feels like taking a deep breath and you get to kind of hear a different part of the song, hear the chord progression a little bit more clearly. But I also add in a little bit of things that kind of, again, helped that transition, because I'm really proud of that transition and how it really does feel like so much cut out, but you didn't lose any energy. It transitioned, but it wasn't a loss. And that was a lot of different little things that went into that. One of these things was this dreamy bells that I added, doing a kind of glissando periodically. That I feel like is such a magical little sound. They're not very loud, but it throws out a little bit of energy, a little bit of magic and whimsy at that point. Then I also have, going into this transition, this dreamy air guitar, which I talked about in my last video, one of my all-time favorite presets from Alchemy. It's very 80s and magical to me. That is also playing the same underlick that's going throughout the whole song, so even though I cut out the main instruments doing that, it has this that's very quiet, very in the background, but it does add a different energy where you're kind of still hearing the same melody, but it's coming from a different place. And I also have these two sweet flute pads doing a little bit going into that transition. The harmonies also do a lot going into that transition. They sound like this. So those, you can see, they kind of ring out well into where the second chorus starts, so that again helps you feel like you've fallen into a different space instead of just abruptly things dropping out of the song. And then we get to the outro, which is, that's also my favorite part of the song. Who am I kidding? This could also be considered a bridge. It's whatever you want to call it. After that kind of reprieve in the second chorus, you then get a lot more energy. So once again, I have one of these places where the last chord just repeats to create a little bit of a pause, and then it comes back like this. So obviously that's kind of an intense part of the song. One of the main things that adds a little extra intensity is I added a second kick to layer on top of it. This did not come from Alchemy. This is it's a sample pack that I downloaded for free. If you Google Synthwave Dojo 80s drum machines, you will find a free sample pack to download. Somebody just sampled a bunch of classic 80s drum machines and then organized them into different categories. So this is from the Emu Drumulator in the kicks, and it's the Kick Retro 2, which is one of my favorite kicks. I use it all the time. It's a really nice, deep, kind of grainy kick that sounds like this. I guess it's not grainy. It's the analog that's grainy. Yeah. But this is it's a really nice thumpy sub kick, so that I feel like added an extra knock to it and helped it pierce through the mix a little bit more. The previous kick was a little bit airy, almost kind of like a shaker that was just pitched down. This is more of like a true kick that helps it kind of pierce through. I brought back the hi-hats there, brought back the arpeggiated patterns with a third one that is also panned to the right, so that adds a little bit more energy to the right, and it sounds like this. And this one also has the gain being automated the same way this one was, so it kind of comes in and out. But if you can see, I have the gain automated in the opposite way, so whenever this one is getting quieter, this one's getting louder and vice versa. So they're kind of weaving in and out from each other, which I thought was fun. Brought back the dark and deep bass, but nothing changed there. And then another one of the main changes is I added a lot to the underlick. I sure hope I'm using that word right. I added these two pianos to it. The Ship's piano is from Alchemy. The Record Collection Grand is just one of Logic's stock pianos. Those I added there, panned a little bit further to the side, so that makes this little part of the song take up more space in the stereo field, but I also I like the hollow vintaginess. It adds a real nice analog warmth to it, I feel. And then I changed, instead of them just playing the underlick, I made these play chords at certain points as well. So that makes them a little more interesting, a little more beautiful. It adds a little bit more harmonics to it, and together they sound like this. Those pianos, again, like the second kick added, also are a little bit less washy, a little bit less reverb heavy, and they do help this part of the song also just pierce through the mix and be more loudly heard. This is something that I'm experimenting with a lot. Instead of just taking the same sound and just bumping the gain up and making it louder, you can layer it with something that is a totally different sound, but it has what that sound is missing. So these two original presets are very beautiful in terms of the warmth and the etherealness and the magic, but they are lacking that quality that makes them easy to hear and easy to identify the notes that are being played. So sometimes layering it with just a regular ass piano can really help it kind of cut through and help someone who hasn't heard this melody before to understand it, whereas I understand it and I hear it and hear the little nuances in it because I wrote it, but this helps it be heard by the listener as well. There's not a lot going on by way of the harmonies in this section, but I wanted those two parts, the kick and the underlick, to kind of come back together and really hit you over the head. And I think I achieved that. The other thing that I added, once again, things that help with the transitions, these are just some sound effects that I layered together to work up to the transition into the outro. Once again, those echo out a lot, so that helps the transition feel less abrupt and more natural. And also I have this Beauty Sleep is pretty high-pitched, very ethereal and space-like. It almost kind of sounds like Dreamweaver, which I love. But then the Choir in a Distant Cave is very deep and very rumbly, so together they're coming in from all parts of the frequency spectrum to just kind of usher you into the next part of it. Instead of just being something low coming up, you have things coming from all directions, which I feel like works really well. I repeated that same sequence again. Sometimes I like to do that, not because I need a transition there, but just because I liked the way it sounded and I wanted to hear it again. Then not much changes as we go towards the end. We just have a repetition of the chorus that now, instead of being sung by the main vocals, is just sung by the harmonies. This sounds very Enya-esque to me, which, if you can believe it, I was never a fan of Enya until very, very recently. I just happened to accidentally start making music that totally sounds like I was stealing directly from her. Obviously, I had heard Caribbean Blue before because everybody's heard Caribbean Blue, but I didn't know that that was by Enya. It wasn't also like even one of my favorite songs. It was just like a song that I knew of, and I never really listened to Enya very much at all, but somehow the amalgamation of evangelical Christian worship music and movie scores and Irish music and bluegrass and all these things, they kind of melded together to make me into someone who makes the music that I make. But I do consider it a massive compliment when people say that my song reminds them of Enya, and now that's definitely something that I'm going for, but this I feel like is especially nostalgic and reminiscent of that style. I really love how the vocals came together here at the end. So not much going on there at the end, just one more loop of the main melody. The only thing I did on the stereo out was I just automated the volume to go down because I have so much reverb and so much delay on so many of these tracks that if I let them play, they would just ring out forever. So sometimes at the end of the track, I just have to tell them to shut the fuck up. Again, as in my previous video, you can see here on the master output, there are a lot of plugins that I did because I do.
My motto in life is, if you do on yourself, and I live by that.
Do my own mixing and mastering, but it's very, very haphazard, and I am still learning as I go, so I'm not going to act like I know enough to teach you how to do it, but I do encourage you to try and learn, because it's good to try and learn new things, and it's good for women to know how to produce and mix and master their own music. More women in music, always, please. Thank you. Anyways, that is my song, I Am. It can be streamed anywhere you get your music. I have 3 singles out currently and a new album that I just finished coming out sometime this summer. So if you like this, please let me know. I will hopefully be making many more of these videos and I hope you enjoy them. Thank you. Bye.